Hey guys, so I've been talking about doing this video for a long time. Basically, I want to talk about autoimmune disorders, specifically Hashimoto's. So I'm going to go way back to me as a child, even as far back as that. I don't remember everything as a child, obviously nobody does, but my dad has told me numerous times that I was sick a lot. A lot of times they didn't know what was wrong with me. I had a lot of severe migraines even at 5 years old. Severe leg aches to the point where I recall missing about a month of first grade because I could barely walk. My legs ached so bad. And doctors never knew exactly what was wrong with me. And then fast forward to, and I would get severe stomach aches. I recall, about the time I was old enough to maybe start, having hormonal changes happen to me. I recall getting severe stomach aches in the evenings, and that was never explained or figured out either. Fast forward to high school, and after I had started, having periods and stuff, I actually kind of went through almost like a remission period. I don't recall having any real health issues during high school, and even into my early adulthood. I've never been one to take very good care of myself, unfortunately. I guess I just haven't put myself as a priority, or I don't know, in high school I ate a lot of junk food, and I just never took very good care of myself. So it's surprising to me that for some reason in high school and early adulthood I actually went through kind of a period where I didn't have any major problems. I don't recall having a lot of headaches during that time, any severe leg aches or stomach aches. I don't know if my hormones just balanced themselves out, and that helped a lot. And then fast forward to, I believe I was 20 when I was pregnant with my first baby. And my pregnancy, actually, that definitely was my easiest pregnancy. It was more like just, I was growing a belly, but I didn't have a whole lot of symptoms of pregnancy. And every single pregnancy since then has definitely gotten worse and worse and worse. But that first pregnancy, I didn't have any real problems. About 29 weeks pregnant, 29 weeks and like 3 days, I believe. And this being my first pregnancy, I didn't really know, and my mom wasn't living near me. I didn't have anyone to talk to about what normal pregnancy symptoms were and all of that. But I do know about 29 weeks I stopped feeling the baby move. And normally I could push on my stomach and get her to move, and I wasn't able to do that. And I just thought, oh, maybe she's taking a break, or, things will be okay in a little while. So I went to bed. I didn't sleep very well that night, and I actually remember crying a lot that night, thinking something just wasn't right. And about 6 o'clock the next morning, I woke up and I called a nurse line, a 1-800 nurse line, and they told me I needed to call an ambulance immediately, which I still didn't take seriously. I had my husband drive me to the emergency room, but we, it wasn't like we were in a huge hurry. We really just didn't think anything was severely wrong. We thought everything would turn out okay. We got to the emergency room, and they thought they'd found the baby's heart rate, but they thought it was a little bit fast, or maybe slow, I don't know, I can't remember. But so they decided to do an ultrasound right before we left the hospital, before they sent us on our way. And they did the ultrasound, and there was 2 technicians doing the ultrasound, and my husband and I remember them immediately running out of the room. And at that point we knew something was really wrong. It was about 10 or 15 minutes before anybody came back in, and it was our midwife that came back in, and we hadn't seen her at all that day, so we were like, wait a minute, something, she's here to deliver bad news. And so she came in and she said, you were correct, her heart is not beating, and we need to figure out the process of, what you want to do as far as delivery. And even then, I still didn't really get the fact that my baby had died. And I just, for some reason, thought I would go into labor, deliver her, and that she would turn out to be okay still. It was just really like, kind of like surreal, very much like a dream. And so I insisted I wanted a C-section. I didn't want to have to go through the work of delivering a baby if she wasn't going to be okay in the end. Luckily, they talked me out of that. And even though I was in labor for like 48 hours because my body wasn't ready, and things just, it was my first baby, so it took a really long time for my body to get ready to deliver her, even though she was only like 3.5 pounds. But we went through the delivery, and, you know, of course, you know, she wasn't okay, and we ended up having to bury her, and go through all that entailed. But they decided to do some tests on me at the time to find out if there was anything, you know, in my blood work or my genetic history that might have caused this fetal demise. And at the time they found out I had factor V Leiden. So this was my first autoimmune disorder diagnosis. And my factor V Leiden is heterozygous. There's two different types, homogeneous and heterozygous. And homogeneous is the worst of the two. Generally, people with homogeneous factor V Leiden would have to be on blood thinners for their entire life because their clotting factors are so high that inevitably it would probably cause a heart attack or something, a stroke. So luckily I have the lesser of the two evils, but with my subsequent pregnancies, I was high risk for all of them because of that factor V, and also because of a previous fetal demise. And so I, you know, after that, of course, went through 5 pregnancies and deliveries, and all of my babies, the rest of my babies, those next 5 the babies were perfectly healthy. My pregnancies were extremely difficult. Toward the end of all my pregnancies, I would get severe insomnia and not be able to sleep, and I would get severe heart palpitations and chest tightening and just feel like I was going to pass out all the time. So it wasn't typical pregnancy symptoms. It wasn't like, oh, my hips ache or I'm just really tired. It was like severe symptoms, but yet nobody else that I knew had those symptoms, and so nobody could really relate. But I knew that I wouldn't be able to have probably as many children as I would like because my pregnancies were just so difficult in that way. I would literally at times feel like I was going to die. The pregnancy was going to end my life and therefore end the baby's life. So not only was it physically hard, but it was emotionally and mentally hard as well. Also, having lost a previous baby, obviously I was always stressed out in my pregnancies because I was hoping that, you know, that what had happened before didn't happen again. They still weren't even sure that the factor V Leiden was the reason for Piper's loss. She was born at 29 weeks, and of course wasn't, she was a stillborn. She was 3.5 pounds. They couldn't find anything physically wrong with her. She looked perfect. Everything looked perfect. During my pregnancy, they did find that I only had a 2-vessel cord, and the cords are supposed to be 3 vessels. So that and the factor V Leiden, between those two, they think may have been what happened, but they still didn't have a for sure answer. So all of my pregnancies after that were extremely stressful because I was just really worried about that happening again. And I didn't think emotionally I could handle that. With it being my first baby that I lost, I didn't really know what I was missing out on. And so after I had more babies and realizing what all the stages I missed out on with that first baby, actually that was when it really started to sink in what I had lost. And so it actually emotionally got harder as time went on. Now that I have 5 children that are all healthy and of course keep me very busy, and I've done, I've done therapy and stuff to kind of get past that. So, I'm definitely better than where I was for a while. Of course, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm trying to talk about autoimmune diseases. So that was my first diagnosis. And I had heard that, a lot of times if you have one autoimmune disease, you will eventually probably have more than one. And basically what autoimmune diseases do to you, according to doctors and science, is that your body sees whatever part of itself as a threat, and it actually, your immune system attacks attacks your own body. I've been reading some things recently that make me wonder if that's really what's going on, or if maybe, science just hasn't caught up to what's really happening. But so far that's kind of where doctors are, and that's the way that they generally treat people. So I made notes here because there's kind of a lot to this, and so I'm trying to keep on task here. But so let me kind of fast forward to 2016. And let me also state that stress or any emotional or physical distress can bring on autoimmune diseases as well. So 2016, I think it was in September, I was about 7 months pregnant with my baby, my daughter, my last baby. And we found out, being military, of course, you should always be ready that you might be getting orders at any time, and of course it usually comes at the worst time. But we had actually been stationed at the base we were at for 7 years. So we were kind of just like, okay, we're going to be here. We're going to be here till we retire, which I don't know how we thought that, because we still had 6 more years to go. But I felt safe. I felt comfortable where we were. We were, we really liked the area that we lived, and we had a lot of friends and stuff. So we weren't really expecting it, especially not being as far along pregnant as I was. So my husband called me one day. I'm on the treadmill walking, 7 months pregnant, and my husband calls me and he says, I just got an email that says that we have orders, but it isn't very clear as to where our orders are to. And so I kind of thought, oh, it's a mistake, we don't really have orders, but I started kind of stressing about it a little bit and wondering and stuff, and I don't remember if it was a few days later or how long later we found out, sure enough, the orders were true. We had orders to Brunswick, Georgia, which was all the way across the country, 2,500 miles away. There was no base where we were going, so trying to find people to have connection with here in order to, find decent housing areas or good schools or good doctors and all of that. Normally you can contact the base or someone on the base and have like a sponsor to help you with all of that. And because we weren't moving to a base, we had a really hard time getting in touch with anybody that could help us at all. So that was really stressful. And then we had to sell our house in the market in Idaho at that time, and Mountain Home was very, very pro buyer and not seller. And of course here we are trying to sell our house. And when we bought our house, it was very pro seller, not buyer. So the market had kind of plummeted at the time we needed to sell our house. So we put it on the market, and luckily we knew a really good realtor who was willing to work with us. We didn't have, a lot of savings to pay a ton toward realtor fees and closing costs and everything that selling entails. So that was very stressful. We had put a lot of money into the house we were living in, and instead of saving it in case we needed to move. And so unfortunately we put about $15,000 into our house and ended up having to put $10,000 up just to sell it, just to get out from under it. So about $25,000 later, here we are. We did sell our house. In fact, it had only been on the market for 11 days, and thank goodness we take pride in our home ownership, and so we took very good care of our house, and we did a lot of upgrades and everything, which really helped sell it in the really bad market that we were in at the time. So we were really lucky to even get out from under it, but we had to put a lot of money into that. Now we have to look and turn around and say, okay, where are we going to live in Brunswick, Georgia? So we start looking at the market here, and of course it's very pro-seller here and not pro-buyer. And so houses here are a lot more expensive, and not only that, we were going to be having our 5th baby, so we needed a bigger house, more space for us to live in. And you know, I didn't want to live in a little crappy apartment or a 3-bedroom house with 5 children. I wasn't very excited about moving here, and so I was like, you know, one thing that will make it easier for me is if I have at least a nice house that I can, you know, reside in while I'm there. And so we started looking, and we found a really good realtor here, and thank goodness we finally got in touch with somebody here that was military working on FLETC that was able to sponsor us and give us a little bit more information about good housing areas and all of that. And so anyway, we were able to find a house here, and it all worked out, but it was extremely stressful. So we drive across the country to move here, a place we've never been before. I'd never even been to Georgia or anywhere close to this side of the country. So I had no idea what we were moving into. I just knew it was a lot different than what I was used to, so it was really scary, really stressful. Drive across the country with 4 kids, and I was, I think, 36 weeks pregnant when we got here. And I didn't know my doctor at all. They were able to get me in for an appointment. No, I was 35 weeks, and they were able to get me in for an appointment when I was 36 weeks for my first appointment with my doctor here. And I'm high risk, so, you know, it was hard to find a doctor that would even see me. 36 weeks, my first appointment, I go in for the appointment, and, you know, everything looks good, everything's measuring good and all of that. They decide to do a non-stress test just at the end to make sure everything sounds okay. My first non-stress test of my pregnancy, which normally during my pregnancies I have non-stress tests all throughout the pregnancy. But this is my first at 36 weeks. And I have always had non-stress tests. I know what a baby's heart rate is supposed to sound like. And when they started that non-stress test, it did not sound how it was supposed to. But I thought, you know, maybe I just don't know what I'm looking for. And so the doctor comes in and she said, this is not a normal heart rate. I am extremely concerned. She absolutely has no highs in her heart rate, and it was all just dips, dips. So she was really worried. She wanted me to go in for another non-stress test, I think a day later. And I had to go into the hospital for that, and they kept me there for like 3 hours because they still couldn't get a good heart rate. And mind you, this is days later, so I'm like, I know it's not, I just drank too much caffeine or didn't get enough sleep, so the baby's reacting to that. I knew something was really actually wrong at that point, and my doctor decided to induce me at 37 weeks instead of 38. So we had my mother-in-law planning on coming to watch our kids. She had her plane ticket for when I was 38 weeks when they're supposed to deliver me, and change of plans, they're delivering me at 37 weeks, and we know nobody here, nobody. Thank goodness we have a good church community, and we had people that, even though we had never even met or didn't know, were willing to come and watch our children. And we just had to have faith that they would, you know, do what they would have the same standards as us and do a good job with that. So it worked out. We had somebody come watch the kids. Of course, the same week that I had the baby, all 4 of my other children ended up with hand, foot, and mouth disease, which not only were they extremely, extremely sick, but I was really worried that bringing home a new baby to that the new baby would end up getting it as well. Let me just say that week of delivering the baby was probably the most stressful week of my entire life. Just thank goodness for the people in our church willing to watch the kids and bring meals. Because I don't know what we would have done. We would have ended up having to Skype for our delivery while my husband was here with the kids. Really sick kids. And anyway, you know, it all worked out. The baby was born and she still had a slight arrhythmia, but never had any problems with that, and the heart doctor wasn't super concerned about it. So she's healthy. She's a healthy 18-month-old, and she's very happy, and she sleeps good at night. Not to say all of my children do, but lucky enough we were with her. And anyway, about 6 months after I had her, well, first of all, actually so I had her in December, the same month that we moved here, and come that next spring I started having a lot of problems I never had before, really. Well, I've had migraines before, but I started having severe migraines with like nausea and dizziness, and didn't know quite what was going on. My kids kept getting everything, and so I kept thinking I was getting what they were getting. But would go to the doctor and they'd be like, no, you don't have strep like your kids, you don't have the flu like your kids. So I didn't know what was going on. I never had allergies before that I knew of, but we moved here and my allergies just hit the roof. They think that's why I was having all of these migraines and everything and getting really sick. So all spring I was really kind of sick, and then May, June, and July I think I was actually okay. I didn't have too many problems, and I believe it was in August, of course, the first month that I decided to homeschool my kids, and all of a sudden I get a weird rash like all over my body, and I also had like a weird ringworm looking thing on the back of my arm. And so I went into the doctor and she said, you have pityriasis. It could probably last up to from 6 weeks to 6 months, and I have like this bad rash all over my body, and I'm thinking this is gonna last possibly 6 months. Are you kidding me? And thank goodness it didn't. It only lasted about 6 weeks. But pityriasis, so the circular, and it can happen the circular, it's called the mother. So if you have like a circular rash pattern in one spot, and then like on your trunk and maybe your thighs and arms you get just a regular raised rash, it's probably pityriasis, which usually only happens to teenagers. For some reason was happening to me. So I get this really bad rash, and then it's not long after that I get really bad kidney pain. My right kidney was hurting me like I had a bad kidney infection. However, there was no infection, but I did have blood in my urine. They didn't know why for sure, and I was getting super nauseous and throwing up all the time, and I wasn't managing. I was barely sleeping at night. I was just really sick. And that was kind of the start of everything. Once the nausea and all of that went away, I started with really bad, my insomnia came back full force, really bad. And I'm not just like, oh, it took me a couple hours to fall asleep. There would literally be nights where I did not sleep at all, where I could not fall asleep the entire night. And then it would kind of spiral, and because I hadn't slept that night, my body would be so exhausted that I literally could not sleep night after night after night, to the point where I would almost be like hallucinating. And yet I have 5 children to take care of, 5 small children, and I'm 2,500 miles away from my family. And I'm not trying to do, this isn't pity party Jamie, I'm just trying to make you aware of some of the symptoms that you could have, and you might have an autoimmune disorder and not even know it, and just think you have something else going on. My doctor started doing a lot of blood work on me. I would have to go in every 6 weeks and get blood work done. Hence the papers, and I mean all my blood work stuff. This isn't even all of it. This isn't even close to all of it, but this was my most recent blood levels. So my thyroid levels, my doctor started noticing, because she'd been testing me for like 6 months or maybe even 8 months. She started noticing that my thyroid levels were going like this, and although they were within the normal ranges, it would be really super low, on the low end of the normal range, and then the next time she tested me I'd be on the super high end, almost hypothyroid range. And because it was swinging so far back and forth, she knew something wasn't right. So then she went ahead and put in a test for the TPO, thyroid peroxidase antibodies. And that is where they test you to see if your body is attacking your thyroid. Your immune system is attacking your thyroid, which is what Hashimoto's or thyroiditis is. And so basically she found that your TPO levels are supposed to be below 9, and mine was 27, so pretty high up there. I don't know, it doesn't say what the really high end of that is, so I don't know what really high is, but I just figured 27 when it's supposed to be below 9, that's a pretty big difference. So I definitely have Hashimoto's, and my doctor believes that Hashimoto's is a hereditary disorder. She believes that if you have Hashimoto's, then your mom may have it and not even know it, your grandma, it just kind of gets passed down from generation to generation. I do know that some doctors also believe, not mine, but some doctors also believe that it can be brought on by stress and also viruses, which to me fit more honestly than just that I've always had this. Yes, I've always had some health problems, but never to the degree that I was having them. And my mom has always had health problems, but she was never diagnosed with Hashimoto's or anything like that. But the fact that I got this rash to begin with and got really sick, and then my insomnia kind of started to set in, which was really the main reason I went to the doctor, was because my insomnia was so out of control. I had to do something about it. So anyway, and another thing that I had always had migraines as a young child. I went through several years in my teenage and early adulthood where I don't remember even having any migraines at all. In fact, I remember every now and again getting headaches, even into my early and late 20s, but the year that I moved here, my migraines are so out of control that literally nothing touches them, and I just have to stay out of the light. Putting heat on my head sometimes would help, but I would get such bad headaches that I'd be vomiting, and riding in a car almost impossible because my motion sickness was out of control as well. I recall going to try and deliver cookies for Christmas at one point, and being on a really windy road, and we couldn't even end up finishing delivering our cookies because I got so darn sick. And so they've diagnosed me with Hashimoto's. Now here's the problem. My Hashimoto's, this is what my doctor says. She says that my thyroid levels are so up and down that if she was to treat me for hypothyroid, which I have been at sometimes, then hypothyroid, that it would probably cause me to be more hyperthyroid, which is where my insomnia and all of that sets in, is when my thyroid levels are really low. So she would be afraid to treat me for that. She'd be afraid to treat me for hyperthyroid, because then it would send me really hypothyroid. So she basically told me, yes, you have Hashimoto's. I can give you stuff for your sleep and headaches and whatnot and all your different symptoms, but I cannot treat you with thyroid, synthetic or desiccated thyroid at this point, because your levels have not, your hormones have not leveled out. So she's basically testing me every 6 weeks, blood tests, until my levels kind of level out to a certain place, and then she'll be like, okay, if you're hyper and it's staying hyper, then we'll treat you for that. If you're hypo and you're staying hypo, we'll treat you for that. So in all reality, a diagnosis has not gotten me to treatment at this point. But it did kind of give me a sense of peace, as far as, all these problems you're having are not necessarily in your head, which before she knew this is what I had, my doctor kept trying to give me antidepressants, which for me I'm against. I'm not against them for other people, but I have been on them before and they have not done good things for me. So I was unwilling to do that. And I'm kind of glad I was, because I feel like if I had done that, we may not have ever gotten to the Hashimoto's diagnosis. I also have other symptoms that I feel like may be my body starting in on other autoimmune disorders, such as like arthritis and stuff. I get really bad joint aches and flare-ups in my joints, and depending on the time of the month, I have I get really bad itchiness. My body just feels like my skin is just crawling sometimes. I get really, really bad PMS symptoms to the point where I almost feel flu-like the entire week before my period. And then my periods are irregular as well. And so I kept thinking, you know, if it's a cycle and every month is the same, then I'll know what day I need to take my insomnia medication. I'll know what day I need to take, you know, my migraine medication. But unfortunately, it's not a set cycle. It happens kind of periodically and however it wants to. And I basically just wanted to do this video to let others know out there that, you know, you are not alone. There are a lot of people who, you know, we may go out and look normal to the world, but there are underlying health issues that make, you know, everyday life really difficult. And I just want all of you to know you are not alone. So I just hope that you guys, anybody out there suffering with autoimmune disorders or any health or mental problems, illness, would just know that you're not the only ones out there. No matter how normal some of us might look, and that we might be able to force ourselves through normalcy in everyday life, doesn't mean that we don't have problems. We do. Everybody has issues of their own. Maybe not health issues, but everybody has issues. And so I just hope you guys know that if nothing else, I support you. I've been there, I know. And lots of luck. Hopefully you guys can figure out your issues as well as I can figure out mine. And we'll talk to you later.